Coldplay, their opener just canceled, and you're on. Can you roll up to the Scotiabank Arena, and you're on at 7 p.m.? Would you be able to walk out on that stage and kill it? If the answer is anything but heck yes, then then you need to just focus on what you do.
Your voice, an idea or opinion that can never be replicated. Something so unique that throughout the known universe, there is only one. But why is it you are yet to share yours? What has held you back from letting the world hear the gift you have inside? To help you on your gifted path, your next set of remarkable masters are waiting. A specialist in landing global stages to showcase your voice, and a viral performer who knows how to connect spoken words to the hearts of listeners, who will all help you answer the question, how do I speak to the world?
I think you might know if you don't know. I love words. I am a self-proclaimed word nerd, and I love etymology and the history of words, and the name of the company I've been running for years is called Archangel. Do you know what Archangel means, or where the words come from? My guess is no, because most people probably don't. I didn't either, by the way, when I named the company, so I'm not trying to feel like I had this crazy vision, but when I discovered what it meant, it felt so resonant. And it comes from ancient Greek, and archos, the first part, means leader. And angelos, like the word for angel from ancient Greek, means messenger. And that blew me away, because our community that we've built, that you're both a part of, is a group of leaders in the messenger space, where often our message is our gift. This is called The Gifted Show because I believe we are all gifted. We have a gift to share with other people that creates impact, and many of us can monetize that in a way that creates income for us. And part of that is sharing our message. And part of sharing your message is often speaking. And you are both, actually the three of us are in this entangled world of people on stages delivering a message. I've been on the producer side my whole life, or at least since I was 16. I actually tried to calculate, and I think I've had 250,000 people attend my events since I was 16. Tricia, I know you've been on all sides of the equation, a producer and supporting people who are on stages. Peter is often on stage. I think I'd like to start, and by the way, part of what I love about this show is I get to connect people. So one of my gifts is connection. So every time I have people joining, the way I curate is, who doesn't really know each other yet that I should probably want to introduce? And instead of doing it on an email exchange or a Zoom call, I figured let's have an audience. So welcome both to The Gifted Show. With respect to introductions, maybe Peter, let's start with you. How would you like me to introduce you to Tricia? Who is Peter Katz?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, Gio, if you were in Tricia's presence right now, what I would love for you to say to her is that I'm a singer-songwriter and a speaker and a facilitator. Those are kind of the three monikers that I use. Singer-songwriter was the moniker that I used for most of my adult professional life, and I thought that was kind of what I was. And then I realized that there were these other things that I could do, and the thing that sort of made me do what I do as a singer-songwriter applied in other areas. So you could let her know that he's a singer-songwriter, he's a speaker, he does these things called keynote concerts, and he's also really passionate about facilitation, so that it's not just about him on stage, but so that the people in the audience have it be about them. That's what he wants people to experience when they come to any version of him being in the room with them. So you could let her know that. You could also let her know that I am very proud to do this youth mentoring work every summer out in Alberta, and that's another big part of my life. And I'm also a human, and that's it.
So the next time I speak to Tricia, I'll tell her all that.
Yeah, just let her know. I don't know if you're going to see her sometime soon, but just let her know.
Tricia, same question for you. How would you like me to intro you to Peter?
If you were going to be in the same room with Peter, I would love for you to let him know that I'm a former dancer. I moved to New York City at 20 to pursue my career in classical modern dance and toured around the world on all kinds of amazing stages and opera houses. Then moved into producing, writing, directing, choreography, working in film, television, and theater. And if you were to be able to communicate with him that we have something in common, which is creating experiences on stages as a speaker, my expression happens to be through movement. And I think his happens to be through music. I think he's a singer songwriter, but you haven't actually officially introduced him to me yet. So I'm hoping that's true. And that I get up every single day in order to help amplify and elevate the voices of others by the work I do in the world, the documentary films I make. And one final thing, my most successful production to date is my 12-year marriage.
Beautiful. Well, you are officially connected.
Hey, Gio, I don't know if you're still there, and I'm not sure if you're going to be talking to Tricia anytime soon, but just in case, I feel like I should also tell you, Gio, because I have an instinct it might be relevant to her, that I actually did my degree. I did a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater Performance. So prior to my singing-songwriting career, I started as a theater performer, and I was actually married to a modern dancer, no longer married, but no hard feelings, lots of love there. She might, I don't know, I just have an instinct she might find that kind of fascinating that I've actually been quite immersed in the dance world, actually made music for many modern dance productions and that kind of stuff. So anyways, if you talk to her, just let her know.
You're both the best. That was my most fun intro ever. Okay, Peter, you mentioned the phrase keynote concert.
Yeah.
So what the heck is that?
So a keynote concert is, it's not just a keynote. It's not just a concert. It's something in between. My keynotes emerged pretty organically after playing many thousands of shows, and people would often walk up to me after the show and they say, "Hey, just so you know, I come to the show as much for the music as I come for what you say in between the songs." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." And then eventually somebody asked me to give a keynote, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll just talk a little more and sing a little less. And that was kind of the first version of the keynote concert. But eventually I was like, okay, how do I actually sort of take advantage of this medium where I'm not kind of trying to play the music business game. Like this doesn't need to be what a concert needs to be, but I also don't want it to just be a keynote because I feel like I would be missing the part that I can do that sort of makes it special. And so I was like, well, how do I bring these two worlds together? And thus the keynote concert emerged.
What I love about that, and you've probably heard me speak about a lot, is the idea of standing out through differentiation by combining gifts together, right? So there are millions of people who are professional speakers and keynote speakers and people who speak in front of different types of audiences. And there's millions of singer-songwriters or vocalists or artists who perform or sing in front of audiences. It's probably rare when you have a Venn diagram of overlapping circles to have that combination, and even more rare when you add even more of your gifts and then facilitation. So one of the lessons for me from you that's already happened is that you don't have to be one thing, and you don't have to have or try to focus on one gift. If you identify multiple gifts and then synergistically combine them together, that creates so much uniqueness that is even more valuable than each of the individual ones. And I feel like, Tricia, you have something similar in your space where, let's talk quickly about what you do now with respect to supporting other speakers. How do you help someone either land stages or perform on stage? What does that look like?
I produce a salon in New York City called the Speaker Salon, and it happens once a year. Speakers come to New York from all over the world to work with me once a week at a theater. They literally get on stage, and I produce that show at the end. It's available for people who live in New York. You can come see it live. You can also live stream it. And in that kind of space and event, I will ask my speakers what they do outside of speaking. And if they happen to share with me casually over coffee that they dance or that they play the guitar or they juggle, I will encourage them to do all of that in their talk. And when I produced TEDx Lincoln Square in New York City, Mary Gaucher, who's a Grammy Award winning singer-songwriter out of Nashville, she said, I want to do your TED stage. I want to talk about X, Y, and Z. And I said, only if you play the guitar and sing inside of your talk. Now, what I've been able to do with specific TED speakers, now that I put speakers on other TED stages, because we're in this new virtual world of speaking, many TED events are producing virtual events. And that doesn't mean that you are limited to sitting in front of your Zoom screen. It doesn't mean you're limited to standing and having a single camera shot of your talk. So in the last several months, I've had the privilege of supporting several speakers who are taking virtual stages. And I've given them the idea, let's hire a crew. Let's hire 2 cameras. We'll get a drone going. We'll have B-roll. We'll have voiceovers. I'll have music. And we'll produce a mini film of your talk. And then we can share that file with the TED organizer and they can live stream that. So that is also a collective expression of all the gifts, the speaking, the dance, the music, filmmaking that I've been able to put out into the world just in the last year because there's so many virtual events happening. So I'm super excited about that. I also feel like if any speaker has anything to say that can only be said in song, then you need to use a song to say it. Just like a musical, right? When the characters can't express themselves anymore by words, they move into a song. I think that's why this kind of collective musical keynote that you're talking about, Peter, is so important.
Love that. As part of today's discussion, I want to support someone who's watching right now, who is either already a speaker that wants to hone their craft, or someone who is helping people with some kind of transformation, but they believe they could impact a lot more people if they raised their voice. I believe that's the right. I'm trying to do my grammar in my head. Raised their voice, or spoke up a lot more, or started doing professional speaking. And we all 3 of us have a different lens to support this with. And I want to start with maybe some fun conversation. What should people not do? So you've probably seen each hundreds of speakers because you're at events all the time and you see things happening, and you don't have to call a specific person out or that kind of thing. But what have you seen even professional speakers do on stages that you would say you shouldn't do that right now if you want to be a speaker?
The first thing is apologize. You never want to apologize from a stage. If you fall down, get up. If you drop your clicker, pick it up. If something happens to the tech, ask for support. If you forget what you're saying, wait, because it will come to you. That's the most important thing. Never apologize from the stage. You are the expert. You are meant to take care of the audience. And the moment you apologize, you lose that credibility.
I love that. First of all, that was my first thought too, is this idea of don't apologize. Like the audience has not come to watch you fail; they've come to watch you succeed. But the thing that came to mind to me as you asked the question, Gio, is this idea that I feel like I see this a lot in the music business, and I certainly was like this in the early parts of my career until I got some very great advice, which I'll share. But there's this idea of like, I need to speak on the TED stage, or I need to play this venue, or I need to do that, or blah, blah, blah. And I need to get this agent or that connection or this manager or that publicist and blah, 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 blah. Like there's this desire to like have the whole team and and I remember the advice that I got early on was from an agent of mine, an early agent, and he said, if I called you up tonight and I said, pretend it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Coldplay, their opener just canceled, and you're on. Can you roll up to the Scotiabank Arena, and you're on at 7 p.m. Would you be able to walk out on that stage and kill it? If the answer is anything but heck yes, then then you need to just focus on what you do. Fall in love with speaking, with playing, with performing, with dancing. Put all of your energy into that essential thing that it is that you really want to do, versus constructing the business around it first. There's a time and place for that to happen. But I would say it will be draining, discouraging. You will probably have an early exit from the business if the majority of your energy is not on that essential piece that you love. One last comment on that. I remember seeing Glenn Hansard, a musical hero of mine, and he was on stage and he said, as an artist, performer, you spend so much of your life banging on the door of the world, saying, "Hey, world, pay attention, pay attention." And he's like, at some point, if you're lucky, the world turns around and goes, "What?" And in that moment, when the world goes, "What?" you want to be ready with this. And so I just love that idea of focus on the part that you love. And even if that means doing a talk for your neighbors or whatever that is, get really great at that. Obviously put yourself in places where you're the next level up of uncomfortable, because you have to rise up to that. But don't worry about the sort of bigger picture of your career if you're still not able to say yeah, I'm just going to walk out and kill it. I know it.
Yeah, and you can't do a grand jeté without doing pliés and being ready with your pliés. So when you get the yes, you know how to do the grand jeté. You're ready. I think that's super important. Something I'll add to what you're saying, Peter, which is so amazing, is in addition to not letting the business part get in the way, it's also so important that you realize you're gonna fall, and that's gotta be okay. And I'll share a story. When I was 13, I was the petite junior Miss Dance of St. Louis. And I went to San Francisco to represent St. Louis in competition. It was a big deal. And I was ready. I was going to win this, right? So I get up there, I do my dance. I'm completely ready, warmed up, ready to go. And I do this huge tour jeté, and I don't just fall. I literally fall on my stomach, flat on the floor. And I got up so fast that I didn't even know I had fallen. And I remember thinking, I got to keep going. That was the most amazing fall I could have ever experienced. It wasn't just a tumble. It was the best fall ever. So I allowed myself to have the best fall ever, to get back up and to finish the dance and to not apologize and to not worry about what was next. So I think that's another part of it as well. You're going to fall. Who cares? Just get back up.
I want to use Peter's story analogy of you're knocking on the world's door, the world finally says what, and you say this. Tricia, when you are working with people wanting to get into the speaking space, how do you help them uncover what this is?
This is one of my favorite exercises and journeys to go on with someone. I ask tons of questions. And most speakers come to me thinking that they have the answer, that they have the idea they want to talk about. And after tons of active listening and asking the right questions, we land on something that's even bigger than what they thought before. And so it really is a matter of idea mining. It's about active listening. It's about synthesizing what they're sharing with me in a way to land on the most potent of the ideas. I was working with this incredible woman, Marie Elizabeth Molly, who came to me and she said, I want to talk about relationships and relationship alchemy and what that means. And I said, I don't think that's it. And we spent time in the space together, and I spent time listening. And after almost a year of working together, she came to one of our sessions and she had just gotten back from Mexico. And she said, I was diving. I took so many amazing photos. I'm an underwater photographer and diver. I knew that about her. But then she shared a little nugget that the sea life she was shooting was gender neutral. And her idea revealed itself to us, how sea life can teach us about gender fluidity. That became her big idea, and it was related to relationship, but it wasn't as mundane as a talk about relationship. So it really is a matter of just waiting for the information to reveal itself. And that's really important. You can't force it.
It's like a keynote concert, right? It's taking two distinct concepts or ideas and finding a way to find the connection, the through line that makes one overarching uniqueness or a unique concept that almost becomes part of your or a speaker's platform or personal brand. I love, like, I'm wondering if there's a way to reverse engineer that process, and maybe that's what you take people through to uncover. And maybe the challenge is, to them it's normal, or to them it's everyday, or just it's a topic that they're used to talking about. They don't see the extraordinariness of it, and sometimes people need external feedback to realize, no, this is not normal or ordinary. This is very special, and you need to be talking a lot more about this.
I think Peter and I probably share this looking through the lens of an artist's eyes. And you're absolutely right, Gio. People come to me, and for example, one of my clients, one of my speakers, is an endodontist, and she does root canals. And I said, Sonia, Dr. Chopra, I'm going to make root canals sexy. You're going to talk about root canals and people are going to want to hire you, and they're going to want to go to the dentist. And that's exactly what happened, because we talk about the story and the history and the fears people have in it. When you understand how to look at a keynote through the lens of creativity, then it becomes even more entertaining, more impactful, and the audience gets far more out of that, for sure. I'd love to know your thoughts there, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things you said, just sort of talking about this like diversity of things that people have, and yeah, like, I don't know anything about root canals, and if there was some kind of life lesson that I could draw or inspiration from how one does a root canal or what leads to needing a root canal, like I can picture that I would forever tell the story about this woman who connected root canals and finding my life's purpose, or digging deep within myself, or whatever that might be. And so I just like wholeheartedly embrace this idea that all of these things that make up who we are, this like, as we're rolling through life, gathering these experiences, these unique passions, these unique ways of looking at things, these things that we've tried, I get goosebumps just thinking about in my own life how those things have all come together in these ways that I never ever could have anticipated. When we were introducing ourselves, I talked about how like I sort of started as a singer-songwriter, right? And I thought, okay, the way that I connect with people is through this thing called a show, where I play these things called songs. And after my show, people walk up and they have tears in their eyes, and they're showing me pictures of their kids, and they're telling me stories about their lives, and we're hugging, and it's this beautiful thing. And then I gave a keynote. And all of a sudden, I'm standing at the back of the room, and people are walking up. They got tears in their eyes. They're hugging me. They're showing me pictures of their kids. And I'm like, oh, hang on a second. And then I'm in a room with a bunch of teenagers, and I'm doing this like mentoring work. And all of a sudden, there's emotion, there's connection. I'm playing music. We're telling stories, but also the fact that I went to summer camp and learned how to canoe, and that I know a little bit of something about the outdoors, and also the fact that I taught swimming lessons and coached a swim team. And so like all of these things came together in this way that I was perfectly qualified to do this job that I had no idea existed, and really to be of service in a way that only I can actually be of service. So I'm kind of getting this vision coming to my mind as I'm talking about it, but it's like the song, the keynote, the facilitation, the dance, whatever, these are just these like branches of a core essence. And so it's like, what is that core essence? And then how do you sort of paint that picture with whatever those other elements outside of it might be?
I love that you're also talking about your humanness. I think so many speakers forget that bringing their humanness into the space and onto the stage is how we connect with each other. And you talking about being able to canoe is like amazing. I want to hear you sing a song about canoeing.
Well, I mean, that's the way you write great lyrics too, right? You don't write great lyrics by sort of saying these big swooping statements. You know, you like, you know, Joni Mitchell talks about the shape of a cloud, or you can describe like the paint chipping in the room, and you know that someone's in a derelict situation or whatever that might be. Like you're not doing these sort of like big statements. You're actually just like talking about these like specific moments where someone's like, oh yeah, I've, you know, sat on the side of the bed in that moment, or you know, I'm blanking on like the perfect lyric right now, but just those key lyrics where you can just situate yourself in a moment that's human, that's of this world.
I I like looking for analogies or crossovers between industries, between professions, and I think of speaking and entrepreneurship and even professional sports with a through line that there is performance time and practice time. So if you think of a pro athlete, like let's say professional NHL hockey player, on average, I think, I may be wrong, but they're getting 20 minutes a game of ice time. That's their 20 minutes to perform. And then they're investing hours and hours and hours of training and prep and practice for those 20 minutes. If you're on stage, it could be anywhere from 2 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on what you're, or maybe even longer. But that's your performance time. And I'm curious from both of your perspectives, how do you prepare or practice for that performance time? Peter, you can go first.
All right. um, you know, different performers will have different approaches. For me, I like to be prepared. When I was in theater school, in our second year of theater school, the director sat us down, and the typical process in a play is you start, like, you read the play, then you do book work. So you're all kind of like sitting around at a desk and you're reading through the script and you're making notes, blah, 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 blah. And then you kind of get it up on its feet and you sort of start to discover the blocking, which is like where you move around on the stage. And then eventually it becomes this polished thing, right? Well, on the very first day of book work, she said, okay, open your scripts. And she's like, all right, Peter, on this line, you're going to walk over to the table. You're going to pick up the coffee cup. You're going to slam the coffee cup down. Then you're going to walk across the stage. You're going to pick up the newspaper and you're going to throw it up in the air. So she gave us all of our blocking. And I was like, this is strange to me. Aren't we supposed to discover this and blah, 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 blah. And so I asked, like, well, why are you giving us this blocking? And she said, because the only thing that I want you to be thinking about is connecting and listening with the people on stage. I don't want you thinking about anything else. And so the way that I interpret that is like, I want to have like all of the things in place so that when I'm in the moment with the people, all I have to do is be present. So before I came on this podcast with you, I came to this space an hour before, fired everything up, did a sound check, made sure everything was right, watched it back, make sure it's good, everything is aligned. And that way I can stand here and I can just listen to you and listen to Tricia and I can be present. So for me, if I'm playing a concert, if I'm doing a talk, whatever it is, I like to feel totally prepared, and then I can be present, I can improvise. My brain that is like the thinking brain is turned off and I'm just in that like open heart connection space.
Agreed completely. I come prepared as well. And I think what you're showing the audience and what we're witnessing is that absolute connection and presence. You're so with us in this moment, Peter. And that is when the play happens. That's when you have the freedom to move beyond the structure of the rehearsal process. And I love that your director had you do something. And I do this with my speakers. If they're stuck and they're performing the same way every single time, or they're nervous and they can't get out of their own head, I'll give them something to do, whether it's sweep the stage or fold clothes or move the furniture around. I will literally give them something to do. And the second they do something, they're out of their heads. So it's absolutely amazing. When I was wrapping up my dance career, I wanted to do a one-woman show to kind of wrap up the culmination of my long career. I'd had all these solos that choreographers had made on me. I started choreographing on myself. And that process was meticulous in terms of my process. I booked the theater 9 months out. I booked all the rehearsal space in advance. I hired an understudy to be me so I could watch her do the dances and make sure that the flow of the show worked. I hired a nutritionist, a yoga teacher to warm me up. And I hired a dresser who could change my costumes in between each piece because I did an 1.5-hour show by myself. And I treated it like an athletic event. I knew what to eat. I knew what my body would do when I ate it. I know how far in advance to eat something so I was done digesting and could have most energy, and when to sit down and have my dresser change my costumes because my quads were blown out so I could recover in 30 seconds. So I treat speaking the exact same way I treated being a top athlete as a dancer. And I think that's a mistake a lot of speakers make, is they don't treat it that way. You have to be rehearsed. You have to have the visual of yourself being on that stage and having a successful delivery. When you visualize it and you feel it in your body, then it happens. And then when anything goes wrong, it's not a big deal because you know how to feel success.
Can I just add one thing to that, Gio? I love what you're saying, Tricia. And like, one of my theater teachers also said to us, like, they think a great actor, like the set falls over and they just keep acting but we all saw the set fall over. So if you have everything else dialed in, then you could incorporate the fact that the set just fell over, and you have the ability to be present because that's the only thing that you have to now sort of work with. And I feel like if you were just so focused on the task at hand or worried that something was going to go wrong or these other elements, you wouldn't be able to just be present with this thing just happen. And the truth of the matter is that moment where the set falls over, if you are able to be with that, then the audience, that's the magic moment because they know that that's just happening for them in this moment. And that's what makes live performance special, is when you feel like it's happening just for you, just in this moment. So anyways, I love what you're saying, Tricia.
Thank you. I want to share, based on what you're saying as well, Peter, this being in the moment. When you are prepared and you know that you have the confidence because of the preparation, when those things happen, like the wall falls over, or when you get introduced like this, please welcome to the stage Tricia Brouk, who has had tons of sex. I mean, success. When that happens, that's the best introduction I could have ever had because the audience was laughing. I walk out there and I say, thank you so much. I can neither confirm nor deny I've had tons of sex. And so the audience was in my hands from the moment I got introduced. And if I was nervous or not prepared, I might not have commented on what just happened.
I love that.
I love that. Hey, Gio, I don't mean to cut you out here, but I want to add one more thing because I feel like we're riffing here. Well, there's just something that Tricia said too that sparked something in me. Like, just when she talking about speakers or being on a stage, and I think Tricia will for sure be on the same page with this. I can't confirm nor deny that, but I'm assuming. But like The other thing that we studied in theater school was this idea of semiotics, which is the study of symbols. And the example I use to illustrate that is like when you go to the opera, right? Before any person in a Viking hat sings a German aria, you arrive, there's a red carpet, there's a guy in a tuxedo opening the door, there's a chandelier, there's gold, there's people dressed up, there's like all of these things that are creating your impression and creating value before the thing that you've gone to see, the opera, happens. Same thing if you go see, a rock band and you go and it's in a dingy club and there's a guy, smoking and it's like, it's $5 and he gives you a shakedown and there's like beer on the floor. You have a completely different sense of value and you've had all of these experiences before you've had the experience. And so I think when we think about like, being a speaker, performer, facilitator, like anything where you are trying to engage people, create connection, whatever that might be, it's so important to think about more than just what is the thing that I'm doing. It's like, what is the setup? What is their arrival? How were they invited to this moment? What, all of those things, it's like this holistic thinking about it. And once you've put all of that in place, then you just get to walk into this beautiful playground where you've set everything up and it doesn't matter if something goes wrong because you're like fully in this world with these people that you've kind of met in this moment where the actual performance starts.
I can't wait to join you and wear a Viking hat. I am so excited about that.
See, I've never heard of the word semiotics. Semiotics. Okay, I got to check that out. To me, the people who are masterful at experience design from that level is Cirque du Soleil. Like I'm such a huge fan of all. I think I've been to every one of their shows in Toronto, a bunch of the Vegas ones, multiple times, and the experience starts the minute you kind of show up. Like the show starts before the show starts, and I study them so much in terms of the events that I produce to not emulate, but to think in terms of that perspective, that the experience maybe even starts the second someone gets a ticket, or the experience starts when they even hear about you, and it's not just what's happening on stage, right? So I think that's a huge lesson for all of us, especially for a creator or an entrepreneur, where it's not just about the thing. The experience of you is much more than the delivery of your service or your transformation. It's much more than the talk. I'm curious. So I've had a lot of speakers on my stages, and when we do our big events, two that have stood out the most for me are Simon Sinek, who, if you haven't heard of him, is author, wrote the book Start With Why and a whole bunch of awesome books, and Brendan Burchard, who is an amazing coach and speaker and author too. And part of what stood out is that it wasn't just education. They weren't just there to deliver wisdom or insights. There was also an entertainment component. There was an emotional component. And then they both have built platforms, meaning people at least in our space, in the entrepreneurial or personal development space, you've probably heard of them. And I'm curious, I'm actually asking because I'm curious, how can we reverse engineer that path to get to that place? And what does it take? And on top of all that, when we do our big event, we're often paying speakers to perform. So I get to see how much people are asking for a speaker fee, plus all of their riders and all that kind of stuff. And I've seen anywhere from $1,000 to $250,000, which maybe for someone listening might just blow them away just from that fact that a speaker can earn over $100,000 for 1 hour of stage time. And I'm curious, so it's kind of the same question, but how does one start and get to that level? And what are the components of building that craft where someone is willing to invest a big chunk of money to have you on their stage?
Peter, do you want to start?
I have thoughts, but I just spoke a lot, so I'm happy to let you go first, Tricia.
I think this might seem really obvious, Gio, but the first thing is ask to be paid for that. That's the first thing. The second thing is really understanding that it's important to communicate with the producer what your audience is going to walk away with. And if your audience is going to walk away completely transformed and changed, and their ideas are the way they're looking at the world has been shifted based on this talk, based on what this speaker is going to share with the audience, then that makes your talk a higher value. And that's really the bottom line is you want to know that the audience is going to be changed at the end of this conversation. And it is a conversation. Yes, you're on stage talking by yourself for an hour, and there's an energetic exchange between you and the audience. And if you share your personal story, you entertain them, you inspire, motivate, educate, and teach them, and they literally want to run out of the room to implement what it is you've shared, then you have a successful keynote that's worth $50,000, $250,000. And I think really it starts with asking to be paid for that, knowing that what you have is so valuable that the audience is going to take immediate action.
I love all that. And I would add a few things. There's so many that come to mind here. So just to build off what Tricia just said about this idea of them, like people, jumping up and running out of the room. So I would add one other layer that to bring in the $250,000 speaker. And this is sort of, I'm running this through the lens of my facilitation training and like the work I do with Exchange and John Berghoff. And we talk about this 3C model. And the first C is content. Second C is connection, and then I'll tell you about the third C in a second. So people will go to a conference expecting content and connection, right? They want to learn something. It's like, give me that information. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to self-improve, whatever that might be. They also go to a conference, an event, whatever that might be, looking for connection. Like, oh, okay, hopefully I'm going to meet some cool people. There's going to be some cool people there. All right, I'm going to go to this thing. Now, a lot of times content can be delivered in like a passive way where there's just sort of like just the speaker and everybody's just like connecting to the speaker, and that's sort of more of a passive thing. But there are also active ways of having the audience members feel this sense of engagement and learning in this more active way. And then there's the connection piece. So again, there can be just the connection between the speaker and the audience, or there could be a way to nurture the connection between the people in the room. So if you do those first two things well, then this third C emerges, which is a sense of community, where people are not just individually running out the door feeling like, oh, hey, I'm going to go do something amazing, but they feel like, holy crap, like I am part of something unbelievable here. Like this group of people that have been brought together here, these are my people. Like this is my community. And so people will go to that event looking for content and connection. But if you give them this sense of community, then they will come back over and over and over again. So I feel like the speaker that can create a community out of an audience, that can bring people together in that kind of a way, where you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful to be in this room amongst these people in this moment, then to the event organizer, I mean, you tell me, Gio, that's priceless, right? Like, sign me up. And the other comment I thought of as you were asking the question was, if you really want to be worth $250,000, now I'm not, that's not my price tag yet, on my way, but I think of Seth Godin, right? Seth Godin's like, you want to really be successful? Like, make people's lives better, like be of service. So if it's like, oh, like how am I going to get better? Like, how am I going to be this, that, the other, be positioned this, that, or the other as a speaker, versus what am I doing that is going to actually make every single person's life better. I will actually have impacted them in a way that they're, like I said earlier, they're not going to walk away thinking I, Peter, am amazing, but they're going to walk away thinking I, person who just watched that, am amazing. I'm surrounded by amazing people that can help me on my path. I'm inspired. I feel connected. Like, that's where the value comes in. So if you can do that, then I think the price tag is irrelevant.
I think you asked me, so I want to answer from the event producer side. And I wish more speakers would even have this conversation, because having dealt with hundreds of speakers, often I believe they think their craft is what happens on stage. And for me, it's way more than that. It's you are an entrepreneur that is speaking as part of your gift. And if you think or put yourself in the shoes of the producer and ask what would be an ROI for the producer? The producer is paying me. They're giving me this much money. They want a return on that. To them, it's an investment, hopefully, and they want a return on that investment. What could that look like? And at the same time, what are their risks? What are their fears? How can I help reduce those risks or mitigate those risks and have way more reward over risk? And I don't think a lot of people are having that conversation. And then, Peter, I know you do this, which is have the conversation with the producers first, maybe even with audience members first, and figure out how to co-create an experience while you're on stage that has the biggest impact and transformation for the audience, and then follow up after. So you treat your stage time as your service, your product, your thing, but there's much more to that, right? I like Sally Hogshead, who's spoken at our events a bunch, has done that, where there's so much conversation before and after the event. It's not just the event. And some of my favorite speakers have done that. Brendan, I mentioned, Simon, JP Sears, who emceed one of our events and also spoke, same kind of thing. It wasn't just about, hey, I'm showing up to speak. It's how do we make something epic? And I'll speak as if I'm the speaker and talking about the event producer, to say, how do I elevate your status with your audience? How do I make you look good as the event producer by being on your stage? Those kinds of questions I would ask, because if you want to be booked, that's who's booking you. It's the person who you're having that conversation with. And I think there is also an element of I don't know what word to use, but fame might be the word. So I think, going back to Simon and Brendan, there's the education component, and the wisdom they're sharing is incredible. And then there's the entertainment component, where it's not just someone speaking and it's not just facts and data, which could be boring. It's, wow, there's emotion component. It's fun. You're laughing. Like when Brendan spoke at our event, the audience was at one point laughing their ass off, and then at one point literally sobbing, crying, all within the same talk. And then there's, I think the next level is like the fame component, where you start to have a personal brand that becomes as valuable, because if I book someone like a Brendan or a Simon, people will say, hey, I want to go to that event because that person's speaking and I follow them and I admire them and I want to see them. And I think you can't start with the fame. That's the next level, but you can start with the first two and create something amazing. And then you become referable. Like Peter, how do you market your, sorry, I almost used quotes, Tricia. Tricia's not a fan of air quotes. How do you market yourself as a speaker? Or how do you advertise yourself to get stages?
Yeah. And just to comment on what you just said, Gio, Chris Rock says you get the first 5 minutes, like, I'm Chris Rock, and then you actually have to be funny. So the fame part, I imagine only gets people so far. But one last comment is the first question I ask every client. I always do an hour-long client call. The number one question that I ask them right out of my mouth is, picture that I've let's say it's May 12th, 8 p.m. Nexus has just finished, and I was the closing keynote speaker, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I'm so glad I booked Peter. That was the best decision I ever made. I'm over the moon happy. I say, what is the feeling in the room, and what are people walking up to you saying? And I just let them go. Like, that's always my opening question to them, because it's all about really fulfilling their dream come true scenario. That's why they're bringing me in. So to dovetail into the question that you just asked me, it's interesting. Like, so much of my career, I haven't really done too much of the work yet of turning on the tap of like going outwards. I would say 98% of my speaking work has been inbound. I think because of the processes that I have been through, where basically every client says to me, nobody has cared about us as much as you have. So it's interesting. I mean, I have ideas around marketing. I certainly position myself in certain ways. And obviously you go to my website, I have copy and all these kind of things. But really what I've tried to do is like super serve every person that I have the chance to work with. And then what happens is I speak to one hospital, and then I'm speaking to every hospital. And so I kind of focus in on the clients that are there in front of me, and I give them every bit of ounce of love and care and attention to detail that I can. And then that tends to do its thing. I'm realizing as I say that out loud, like maybe that's not like so actionable for somebody listening, because it's like, well, how do you get your first client, or what that looks like. But if I actually go back in time, I would say, well, yeah, I've been doing that the whole time. Early in my career as a singer-songwriter, I would play house concerts. So you're literally in somebody's living room and there's 20 of their friends there. And I would show up at the house concert, and not only would I have my guitar and a little PA, but I'd also have a bag of lights maybe, and I might rearrange their living room furniture and like make it a special moment. And I would always send them a thank you, or like have tea with their kids, or whatever it was that they wanted. And just like, I might not have been able to, like be a world famous musician in that moment, but I was like, they were important to me, and I let them know that. Same thing when I was working with venues in the early days. When I couldn't sell out the venue, they got the posters well in advance. They saw that I was doing my best promoting it. I showed up on time. I was thoughtful. I didn't play longer than I was supposed to play. I sent a thank you afterwards. So I've not really been about the sort of like, spray and pray kind of mentality of marketing or building my career. It's like every person who's in front of me is a human being who wants something, and who has their own dreams and their goals and ambitions and whatever that might be. So whether that's an event planner or an audience member or anything under the sun, it's like, how can I really make them know that they're special, that I appreciate them, and that I'm here with my gifts to be of service to them? And so that's my marketing, I guess.
That question was slightly rhetorical, because I kind of knew the answer, but to me, the answer is, you mentioned Seth Godin. One of his most famous books is Purple Cow. The idea of standing out by being remarkable, or in other words, being worth talking about. And if you are remarkable on stage, you are worth talking about to other people, because that elevates your status with the other person to share about this person. And I think that's in general in any context, whether it's a business thing, entrepreneurial, or as an artist, or in any career. If you stand out in that way, people will want to talk about you, because it makes them look good or feel good, or help someone else to talk about you. And I know that most of your gigs or bookings come from someone seeing you or experiencing you, and then wanting to see you on a different stage. And I think that's how most of this happens. The majority of people that have been on my stage were referred. I pre-pandemic times, it was probably daily that someone would email me cold saying, "Hey, here's why I should speak at your event." And I had no idea who the person was. And how am I supposed to respond without any context? There's so much risk to me and it doesn't make sense. And I would rather, like if you want to speak on my stage, it's a good idea to be referred by someone who's seen you speak on their stage or that kind of concept. And to me, that's how a lot of this should work. Tricia, I'm obsessed with the concept of story and storytelling. And if you trace back to the beginning of civilization, that's how all wisdom was shared. And I think that when you're on stage, it can't just be data and facts. There has to be an element of sharing story. How do you not be boring? Like I think part of the challenge with storytelling is that people don't have some kind of framework around telling an effective story that is motivating and inspiring and emotion inducing, that doesn't leave people yawning. So I'm curious if there's something you share with people around how to tell an effective story or how to share stories on stage.
I think that it goes back to what Peter's been kind of referring to in this entire conversation, which is the humanness. When you are giving yourself permission to be vulnerable and authentic and share your humanness in story form in order to serve the audience and to create a teachable moment or to give them takeaways, you're giving them the ability to relate to you. So they're not separate from you. They feel like, oh, I could also do this. If this person can do this, that means that I can too. And really, when you're sharing a story, it's got to be from a place of service so that you're not sharing a trauma or a tragedy that you've yet healed from. If you're sharing your story too soon, the audience is going to know that, they're going to feel that, they're going to need to take care of you. And that's the absolute wrong time to share that story. And I'll give you an example. Sarah Montana, who applied to speak at TEDx Lincoln Square in New York City, she applied with the written application, and it was about forgiveness. She wanted to talk about forgiveness, and she shared briefly the story of her mother and brother being murdered on Christmas Eve. And I thought, how can this person ever tell this story? I'll feel bad. The audience will feel bad. It'll just be a sad situation. And I realized that I needed to challenge myself to give her the opportunity to show me how she was going to share this story in order to teach the audience how to forgive. And I gave her a callback where she was able to create a video submission where she talked about this experience. And what I learned is she was completely healed from it. She was not reliving a trauma. She was sharing an experience and a personal story in a way that taught us if someone can move beyond such a tragedy, such a horrific experience of walking in on your loved ones being murdered on Christmas Eve, and how to move into forgiveness, because nobody tells you how to forgive. They just tell you need to. She was able to communicate that to me in a way, and finally on my stage, that inspired the audience to think, I can forgive, and I'm going to do it today. And that's the power of storytelling, really sharing the information from a place of healing. And you've heard me say this, and I'm not the only person who says this, sharing the story from the scar, not the wound, in order to serve the audience. That's really the power of storytelling. And it can't be self-indulgent either.
Peter, what about you?
Good.
Peter, how do you know that the story is landing when you're on stage? And what elements of it are working?
Well, I'm just like taking in what Tricia said. That was so good, sharing from the scar and not the wound. When again, I keep referencing theater school. I haven't referenced theater school in so many years. I mean, I do in my work, but this conversation has led me there in a beautiful way. And one of our teachers always said to us, like, your job as a performer, and maybe this actually does help answer the question you just asked, is to actually put people at ease, to have them feel like they're in good hands. And when they feel like they're in good hands, like they're safe in your hands, then you can kind of take them anywhere. And so I guess I feel like the story has to be of service to people. Like that you're not just telling the story to get it off your chest, or because you want people to know this thing about you, but it's there because when someone is telling that story to a friend, they're going to say, like, it made me think about this, or it somehow hit their own life. It's the same thing with like a great song. Like if the song is just like the lyrics are like perfectly intelligently written and everything is like perfect, but it has no heart and soul to it. It doesn't have some of those rough edges that give it that humanity, that allow people to kind of like enter that space, because all humans are imperfect and have rough edges around them. Then it's not gonna land. It's not gonna be about them. And so it's just, how do I make this about them? And the irony, I guess, is that the way that you make it about them is you have the courage to be incredibly specific. You have the courage to deliver some of those very particular details, those things that feel very, very personal and specific to you. But for the person that's going to relate to that, they're going to say to themselves, oh my gosh, how did he know? Like, I feel so much like that. How did he know? And the risk of doing that, which is actually a positive at the end of the day, is there's some people that are not going to connect. But in a way, you want to be slightly polarizing. Like, you want to have the people that love it be like, oh my gosh, I feel that so deeply. And the people that don't be like, whoa, this makes me uncomfortable. I don't like this. And if you think about any of the great thought leaders, artists, speakers, there's people that love them. There's people that love Brene Brown, and they're just like, oh my gosh, she's telling my life story. And there's other people that are like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. Like, what's this crap, And same thing with art. Like, people like love Megadeth, like heavy metal or whatever. And then people are like, that sounds like someone screaming and I hate it. So how can you have the courage to like boldly stand in the specificity of your story, so that the people that are going to love it just see themselves in there, and you're not trying to win over everybody.
I love that. And also reminding yourself that your story is important, and it doesn't have to be this big, epic, crazy, traumatic thing. That you sharing your story is so important, and that there's one person out there who is meant to connect with it. I saw Thich Nhat Hanh speak at the Beacon Theater in New York City many years ago. And for those of you who aren't familiar with his work, he's a Zen monk out of Vietnam who created Plum Village in Paris and then was in New York for a while. And when he was in the city, he's very quiet. He was very quiet. He passed away not too long ago. He was telling the story of mindfulness, and he said, mindfulness is being present. And I was hanging a picture on my wall one day, and it was very slow how he was describing this, and we were all leaning in and like trying to hear his beautiful voice. And he said, and I picked up the hammer and a nail, and I hit my thumb with the hammer. And I realized in that moment I wasn't being mindful. And the entire theater burst into laughter that this incredible monk was talking about nailing a picture on the wall, and we were riveted. So the simplicity of the details, like you're talking about, Peter, are so beautiful and so important. And so I just remind everyone who's listening that if you think for 1 second your story isn't important, revisit that, because it is.
In a genre or field like speaking, or when you're on stage, or any kind of performance on stage, I have a sense that first impressions are super important. And I think that, especially as a speaker, the first thing you say, I'll say the first line, um, in terms of what you're saying, but also how it's delivered, is super important. I think it sets the tone for the rest of your talk. How do you suggest someone thinks about literally the first thing they say with respect to what to say and how to deliver that first statement and how to maybe even prep for that? Because if you nail that, people will lean in, just like you mentioned, Tricia. And if you don't, they may not even stay completely present or in tune for the important things you have to say, because they've made some kind of judgment or positioning or labeling of you that isn't correct. It's just kind of what happens. And I've been a judge for speaker competitions as an example, so I'm paying strict attention to these kinds of things. And I find, and I'm also, I produce events, but I'm also watching audience engagement for those kinds of things, and it's often right down to that first line. So what do you both suggest? Maybe we'll start with Tricia, but what do you suggest, or maybe what do you teach clients around how they start?
One thing that I encourage all of my speakers to not do is ask a question at the very top. And the reason that I encourage my speakers to not ask a question is because if half the room knows the answer, they stop listening because they know more than you. If half the room doesn't have an answer, they stop listening because they don't feel like they're good enough to be in the room with you. So you've just completely lost the entire audience by asking one question. So I'm on the fence to not ask questions, even though some speakers think getting engagement right away is helpful. I disagree with that completely. The other thing is asking, or the first line of your speech, however you craft it, needs to earn the audience's trust immediately. And like you were saying, Peter, you want to create that environment of safety so that they are all of a sudden one in a room of thousands. And it's really tricky. And I think workshopping that first line is really important. Workshop that first line in front of another audience before you go on to that big stage of 200 or 1,000 people, so that you understand, how does this line make you feel? What do you experience from me as I say it? Also, when you're backstage, once you've landed and crafted that perfect opening line, say it out loud before you walk out there, so that you know exactly how to deliver it for the most impact. Because you really have moments, seconds, to earn their trust back if the first thing you say flops. So the crafting of the first line, for me, it's just like workshopping out-of-town previews. Use it on other audiences until you know it's the right line, and then be sure to not fumble it, right? The last thing you want to do is get on Saturday Night Live and say, live from New York, it's Friday, Thursday, oh, Saturday night, right? So it's really important that you're clear on that delivery as well. But I think the biggest thing is, if you can eliminate the asking of the questions as the first thing, as the opener, that would serve you.
I love that, Tricia, and I have two thoughts. So the first one is, I'm gonna put a spin on the question and say that what's most important is how you are internally versus anything that's going to come out of your mouth. We talk about this a lot in my facilitation community, that like when you're designing an event, it matters more if you had breakfast that morning, if you went for a walk, if you're in a room that's inspiring to you, maybe you're surrounded by the trees, than whatever you might have up on the whiteboard. Like, how are you internally is more important than anything that's going to come out of your mouth. So a practice that I have, especially before I'm doing something, big or whatever, is I will just close my eyes and I'll just meditate on the word trust. And I'll just meditate on the word trust, even if it's just 30 seconds before I walk out on stage. It's just focusing in on the word trust. And so that I walk out on stage and I'm in this place of trust. I trust myself. I trust the moment. I trust that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And that to me is more important than anything that I might say. So that's my first answer. The second answer, I guess a bit more technically, I'm actually in the midst of taking a storytelling workshop right now. A friend of mine, Michel Naray, he's a brilliant storyteller, and he's offering the 6-week workshop. So I was like, yeah, sign me up. Let's do that. I love it. And I just was in his class Tuesday night, and he had us do this exercise where we wrote out a story, and then he had all of us cut the first paragraph, like just delete it. And it was amazing how by deleting the first paragraph, you just got right into it. Like rather than Thich Nhat Hanh, like, let me tell you a story about blah, 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 blah. It's like, I had a hammer and a nail, and you're there. So I would say, like, how can you just delete so that we're right there with you versus any setup or preamble or anything that you think we might need to know. We probably don't need to know it. We just need to be in that moment with you.
Love that.
I had a hammer and a nail.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I have the, I guess, honor and privilege as a producer to be backstage with every speaker before they're on stage. And I get to see, it feels like every one of them has their own ritual. I don't want to share what the rituals are. I think it's something to keep private for each of these people. But it's one of my favorite things to see someone in the 5 minutes before they're on stage, before they're introduced, with their own personal, beautiful ritual. So I feel like anyone who wants to speak or is speaking, find your thing, and it becomes part of your experience. And I love, for you, Peter, the focusing or meditating on the word trust. I love that. If there was such thing as a speaker report card, what would the categories be? So if you're going to, if you are a professional speaker or you want to become one, what are the things you need to think about in terms of being a speaker on stage? So what are the topics?
Topics that you would grade a speaker on delivering or their performance? I think when I certify speakers through my academy, the Big Talk Academy, they have to meet the qualifications of educating, entertaining. They have to align with the values of this company. Values are really important. They have to be a good human being, and they have to tell their story through their point of view. So I think it's authenticity, storytelling, entertainment, education. That's what I really look for as far as an amazing speaker goes.
Yeah, I mean, authenticity is top of the pile, I think, as far as what I would say, and then I also think there's a real beauty in studying the technical parts, and I maybe it's just because I have my background in theater, but you have to remember that, like, you're not just a pair of lips moving, blowing air. Like, you have a whole physical body. So how are you, and that body, and to go back to semiotics and symbols, like, that body is communicating. So I would say you really want to not just be up in your head, like, not just sort of assessing what it is that you're saying, but what is the vehicle that you're using to say those things? So how are you using the space? How are you in your body? How are you communicating? How are you breathing? All of those sort of technical things that one does in order to create that sense of, oh, this person, they've got me, for the audience. That then allows them to relax, go on the journey, be transported, cry, laugh. They can have their human emotions because they're sort of fight or flight, reptilian, I need to save this person because they're in trouble up there. Brain can turn off and they can drop into their emotional self. So that's my answer.
I love that.
Okay, Peter, I don't think I could ever have a conversation with you or have you over my house without you playing something. And I would love for our audience to experience what that's like. Is there a specific track or song that comes to you based on today's conversation? Like I am a bit biased. My favorite song is Halo, and I know you performed that and love to sing it. And on the topic of angels and messengers, that kind of fits, unless there's something else that you feel called to share.
Well, I actually have an idea for a song. I mean, also you don't want to get sued by Beyonce, right, Gio? I mean, I'm happy to do Halo for you, but I thought I could do a PK original for you.
Yes.
That I think would work well with some of the things that we've talked about, and some of the concepts that I think I've tried to share and that I heard in what Tricia shared as well.
Perfect.
So, and I'm here in my streaming studio, and I actually have a client call right after this. So I happen to have a camera set up on the piano. So I'm gonna just flip over to the piano here for a second. You're gonna see some in the moment virtual stagecraft here.
Love it.
Here we are.
Nice fade.
I know people sometimes think that the piano is like one of those green screen backgrounds or something, but in fact, it's a real piano. Just gonna hit this. There we go. So, I was talking about these ideas of how do we make it so it's not about us, that we do what we do, we take our craft as speakers, dancers, actors, performers, thought leaders, whatever that might be, and we show up in service of people through these things that we do, community leaders, whatever that might be. So this is a newer song from my latest album. And I used to tell like a whole backstory about this thing, but instead I'm just gonna tell you that this is a song about letting go. And we all have things in our lives that we hold on to. And the truth of the matter is that we are holding on to those things because we feel like they're keeping us safe. They helped us get to where we are. And that's great. Those things were helpful at the time. But as you often say, Gio, the things that got us here are not the things that are going to get us there. And so we've just spent the last hour or whatever it's been hearing about new concepts, new ideas. And if you listen to other episodes of the Gifted show, I'm sure there's all kinds of other all kinds of other new ideas that have emerged. And if we want to make room for those new ideas, then we have to be willing to let go of some of the old ideas and way of being. So if this is a song about letting go, then my question to all of you as you listen to this song is, what is something that you are willing to let go of in order to make room for something new? Maybe that's something that you heard in this episode today that made you think, maybe I could try that a little bit differently. So what is something you're willing to let go of in order to make room for something new? This is called Come Down. Come down, come down, come down from the cloud you're in. I see what's happening. I won't let it this time. Come down, come down, come down, or come down crashing. You know that it's happening. I won't let it this time. Don't paint her in a picture, don't put her up on your wall. Don't invite her to the party and expect her to say nothing at all. 'Cause if love's gonna live, it's gotta breathe a bit. needs air push and pull, no fear of losing it. If I want to break from the past, if I want to have a chance at something that lasts, gotta start from the ground up. Gotta round up every bit of courage that I've got. Learn to love what I don't know, learn to love when I get lost. I come down, come down, come down from the clouds you're in. I see what's happening, I won't let it this time. I come down, come down, come down, I come down crashing. You know that it's happening, I don't let it this time. It's not the picture of love that I was raised on. It's not the literature that all those daydreams are based on. But it's real and it's good. It's what comes after I should, you should, we should, wish we could. It's the rain and the storm and how it makes the green grow. It's the mountains that form and the path of destruction, the lava flow. It's the map of the scars on my skin, saying look how far I've come, look at where I've been. And it's beautiful in its own way. Sometimes the sky's so pretty even when it's gray. It's beautiful in its own way. Some things make us breathe the deepest as they take our breath away. Come down, come down, come down from the clouds you're in. I see what's happening, I won't let it this time. I come down, come down, come down, I come down crashing. You know that it's happening, I won't let it this time. Come down, come down, come down from the cloud you're in. I see what's happening, I won't let it this time. I come down, come down, come down, I come down crashing. You know that it's happening, I won't let it this time. I won't let it this time.
Wow. As I come back to the planet, that was incredible.
That was incredible, amazing, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter and Tricia, thank you so much for sharing your gifts with us on The Gifted Show. Love you both and so honored to have you both together. And I hope this was a fun connection for both of you.
Amazing.
I loved this conversation. Tricia, thank you so much for just reconnecting me to kind of all of that, those memories and that learning, that kind of seminal time in my life when I was in theater school. I'm just so grateful for this conversation, because I don't think that I think about those things actively as much. They're sort of in me, but it was just nice to revisit that and externalize them. So thank you for that. And Gio, thank you so much for bringing us together.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Now you've found your voice, it's time to use it to help the masses, to share your gift with those who need it most. I'm here to tell you that you, my hero friend, are ready to create multiple life-altering transformations. See you next time, as our next set of guides will show you how to create world-class group transformations.